Hello, my name's Mr. Tinkler. I'm a maths teacher from Newport, teaching 25 years, and I'm doing additional maths today about factor and remainder theorem. I've taught additional maths for 13 years, so I know this topic pretty well. Now, this follows on from our revision session 6. That was just to do with ordinary factorising, and I talked about the smiles idea. Lots of people call it different things. It was called nose and chin when I was in school. And there are lots of different ways, but we find the smile idea helps us when we're doing factorising for cubics. So we'll have 3 sets of brackets. So start off with an example from last week's session. Straightforward. This is a B grade GCSE question. Start both brackets with an X. You find 2 numbers to multiply to 15. And they have to add or subtract to -2, but they're going to add to make -2. So I have +3 and -5. We put the smiles in to give us 3x minus 5x. And that will give us -2x in the answer box. But I get -2x because I need to get it to say -2x because that was what was at the top. Okay, that's a B grade GCSE. This means -3 and 5 are factors of this expression. -3 is a factor. I know that says +3, but you would do the opposite. Basically, if you said solve it, you'd say x equals -3. So it means -3 and 5 are factors, which will be important when we move on. This one's an A grade question, as I said in last week's session. Some of you might do something called slide and divide, or various different names. You might do 3 2s or 6. I find from my 20 years of teaching experience that it's just easier if I just do a little bit of trial and error, admittedly. And this will come into the factor theorem after these couple of slides. So as I say, this is a recap of the last session. -1 plus 6 gives us +5. How did I get that? Well, I did it by a little bit of trial and error, getting these numbers in the right places first of all. And this means 1/3. Why? Because 3x minus 1 equals 0. 3x equals 1. X equals 1/3. X plus 2. X plus 2 equals 0. X equals -2. These are the factors. Now, when we go on to the factor theorem, you'll see why that's important. So, as the slide says, you may be asked to find the remainder of a polynomial after being given a factor of the expression. This involves substituting a specific value, and the specific value is linked to what we've just said. If the answer is 0, then there's no remainder, which means it's a factor. If you think of when you're in primary school, 5 is a factor of 20 because it goes into 20 with no remainder. 5 is not a factor of 23 because it goes in with remainder 3. Okay, so here's the first type of question, determining factors, see if they're a factor. Is x minus 1 a factor of that expression? Now what you do not sub in -1, you sub in +1. Why? Because x minus 1 would equal 0, so x would equal 1. You sub in 1. Substitute 1 in. When you substitute 1 in, you get all these numbers, 1 minus 4 minus 5 plus 8. That gives us 0. If it equals 0, then it is a factor. Then x minus 1 is a factor. If it hadn't been 0, there would have been a remainder, so it won't be a factor. Those ideas you should know from year 4, 5, 6. So x minus 1 is a factor. So what I'd like you to do for yourself for a few seconds, just see if these are factors of this questions. I'm not particularly after doing them all, but if you want to, you can do them all to check. But I will give a couple of minutes before I then go on to explain whether they are or not for some of them. Okay, so the first one you would sub in 5. You can use calculators for this now. Additional maths is a calculator paper, and so will any A-level papers, because this topic is on your Unit 1 in Year 12 maths. So it can be the same idea. 525 plus 150 minus 35 minus 90. So that will not give us 0, so it's not a factor. For the next one, you won't sub in 3, you sub in minus 3. It's the opposite sign, you can learn that way, but really you need to know from x plus 3 equals 0, so x would equal minus 3. Sub them in yourselves on your calculator to see if they work. And when you substitute minus 3 into a calculator, you should put them, well, not you should, you have to put the minus 3 in brackets and then put cubed on the outside. So here are the answers to go with those 6. If you're still working on the exercise, turn them off now and look at those. Now, it's only a factor in 2 cases, but it says equals 0. Don't worry about any other number. Unless it says 0, it's not a factor. So it was only in those ones. So if I know, I think it was number 4, it was a factor. So x minus 3 will go in, and this will be handy when we do our next piece of work. Finding remainders. This is pretty much the same idea as we've just done. Find the remainders divided by x plus 1. Now, there are lots of different methods for this. I did long division when big bus shelter when I was in school. I know still some teachers will teach it that way. And I'm not saying any method's better than the others. It's just I don't do that when I find it easy. If I just substitute in minus 1. Because x plus 1 equals 0, so x equals minus 1. Substitute minus 1 into there and you'll get a number. Again, as I said, when you put minuses into your calculator, you need to put them in brackets with the power outside the bracket. And that will give us the answer of 8, which means the remainder is just 8. As it doesn't equal 0, it's not a factor. The remainder is 8. If that had said 42, the remainder would have been 42. It's a pretty straightforward idea, and it will help you for your, if you're doing the GCSE maths as well this summer, same sort of skills, substituting negative numbers into using your calculator. Okay. So this is really when we get into an A-level type question now, factorizing polynomials. Now, you'll see there's a cube. That doesn't mean to say there always will be 3 brackets, but generally in additional maths papers, it'll mean there'll be 3 brackets. Now, this is a tough question. They're not giving us any clues. When I show you some additional maths past paper questions, they will give us quite a few clues along the way. So start with substituting 1 and 2. Now, this one, to find what numbers you might try, they've got to go into number 10 on the end. So I might try 1, 2, and then 5. Minus 1 and minus 2, I'd rather not substitute minus numbers in because I'm not so strong with that. But with a calculator, you should be okay. But the numbers have to divide into 10. So 1, 2, 5, and 10 you might try. So we're trying to find a factor. We substitute in 1 first. What number does this give? That gives us minus 10. So 1 will not be a factor, which means x minus 1 will not be a factor. Why did I do that? Because if I said x minus 1 equals 0, x would equal 1. Easy, short, sharp method. Not good maths teaching, but easy for some of you to understand. Whatever number you put in there, it's the opposite sign in here. So that's not a factor. That's not going to help us yet. Now we substitute 2 in. That does give us 0. This means that x minus 2 is a factor, not x plus 2. X minus 2, and I keep repeating this. The reason why is because it says x minus 2 would equal 0, x would equal 2. Right, now we know that x minus 2 is a factor, we can make a start on the question. Okay, factorize when x minus 2 is a factor. So our first factor is going to be x minus 2. Now we're going to have to put something in here. There's going to be a quadratic with a squared power that's going to fit with all of these. Now, the idea of smiles I introduced in lesson 6 is really useful for this topic. So first of all, what you're going to do is find a term that's going to give you 3x cubed. Well, x times what will give us 3x cubed is 3x squared. Then the next thing, you don't do the middle term, you do the end term. So you've got to think minus 2 times what will give us 6. Minus 2 times what will give us 6 will be minus 3. Not plus 3, as lots of people think. Just check, minus 2 times minus 3 is plus 6. Now, admittedly, the middle bit is up to you, whether you do the x squared or you do the x. If it works for the x squared, trust me, it will automatically work for the x. If you don't believe me, you're going to multiply out the brackets totally when this is finished and check yourself. I normally do the x squared term. Why? Because it's nearer the front. So I've got a smile here that says minus 6x squared. But I want to get 2x squared. So now I'm going to have another smile here that's going to get me from minus 6x squared to 2x squared. I've got to get from minus 6x squared, because that's the first smile, to 2x squared. Why? Because 2x squared is the term I'm trying to get. If you did the x term, you'd have to do a different smile. You'd have to do the x and the minus 3. Generally, start with the x squared term. Then you won't have to do the x term. So I'm on minus 6, and I'm going to get plus 2. That means I need a smile with 8x squared in it, because minus 6 plus 8x squared is 2x squared. X times what will give us 8x squared plus 8x. Just check that again. X times 8x is 8x squared. Minus 6x squared plus 8x squared gives us plus 2x squared. So say if you want to multiply out all the terms to check it give us minus 19x, I wouldn't do this personally on exam day, it's a waste of time. But if you check minus 2 times 8x is minus 16x. X times minus 3 is minus 3x. Minus 16 minus 3 will take us to minus 19x. Now, it does say factorize. We haven't totally factorized yet. We can still factorize this with our GCSE skills, ideas we spoke about in lesson 6. Let's go on to that slide. X minus 2 is going to stay the same. I'm going to start the brackets with 3x and x. So there are other methods you can use. However, you've been shown at GCSE, you can factorize this the same way now. I put my smiles in. Okay, these slides are perfect. So the smiles are in the correct order. But if I put 3 there and I put 1 there and I draw my smiles in, it's not going to give me 8x. It's not the end of the world. I just have to set up again and start the smiles again. Minus x plus 9x gives us 8x. Brilliant. I have now factorized the cubic into 3 separate brackets. Final answer says at the bottom, they would accept here as a final answer. We've just written that down just to highlight to you. It's nice and easy for you to see the final answer. Now, these questions are all from additional maths papers. So you can get a feel how they look. They're not exactly the same every time, but they are very similar. So this one starts quite nice. It even tells you what number. Evaluate means work out. F of minus 3. That means we're going to substitute minus 3 into this. You can do it in your head or use a calculator. So before I hit my answer button, I would advise you to substitute minus 3 in and see if you can get something from that answer, and see if that might even give you an idea what this bit is saying underneath. So when I've subbed in minus 3, it gave me the answer of 0. Now, if it's 0, that tells me that it's a factor, but what is a factor? Not minus 3 is a factor, it's the opposite sign. It's going to be x plus 3. In brackets, I've explained over here why it is x plus 3. I've written that in brackets. You certainly don't have to write that on your exam paper. It's just for your understanding. So x plus 3 is a factor. Now, some years they might say hence factorize, which means work something out from up above. But our first factor is going to be x plus 3. Now, I'm going to give you a little chance to look back maybe a slide to see what I did with the smiles. I will put my answer up in 30 seconds or so. But your first bracket is x plus 3, and then you need a bigger bracket. You've got to get something to multiply to x cubed from the x. You've got to get something to multiply to 18 from the 3. Okay. Now this shows the full answer. So I've done it all in one go. So let's check where I got this from. X times x squared gives me the x cubed term. 3 times 6 gives me the 18. So it's the middle term. I've circled off the minus 2x squared to show you I'm trying to get to minus 2x squared. That's the trickier bit, doing the bit in the middle. The first times by the first give you the first term. The last times by the last give you the last term. So Now I've done a smile. I knew this smile is definitely 3x squared. Now this bit I don't know yet, but I know I've got to get to minus 2x squared. So I put minus 2x squared in the bottom. And I just use my basic primary school maths. How do I get from 3 to minus 2? I minus 5x squared. 3 minus 5x squared gives me minus 2x squared, which is what I wanted. So then I do x. I've done a smile here. X times minus 5x is minus 5x squared. Then to get from this stage to this stage, just your ordinary GCSE B grade maths. Two numbers are multiplied to 6, and then we'll add, subtract to give you minus 5. The two numbers, minus 3 times minus 2, will give us positive 6, and minus 3 subtract 2 gives us minus 5. Now we have about 7 or 8 questions of the same style. So you can look back at this one to help you with the next ones, or wait until I show you my answer. So this one's got a part A. Find the remainder when when this expression, this cubic expression, is divided by x minus 2. So first of all, just make sure you substitute in the correct number. Give you 30 seconds to do that. Okay, so we're going to substitute in 2. Sub in x equals 2. Why? Because x minus 2 equals 0. When I substitute it in 2, I've got the remainder of 40. Now you can write remainder 40 or just put 40, perfectly acceptable. Now this one says show that x plus 3 is a factor. Now hopefully you've seen from the first few slides, if it's a factor, it's going to equal a particular number. So if you substitute in the wrong number or substitute it incorrectly, you don't get the particular number we're after, you know you're in trouble. So I'll let you do dotty 1 now, and most of you should say, oh yes, I know I've got the right number, and that will help you with dotty 2. Okay, so I've subbed in minus 3, and yes, you've got to show your workings. Hopefully by now most of you realize it's got a factor, it's got to equal 0. If you just said sub in x equals minus 3 equals 0, you haven't shown your working, so we haven't generally worked out where you've got it from. As I said through all my videos, additional maths really isn't a problem with time. You have lots of time to do this, so if you need to write down a little bit like I've done, you'll have lots of time. Hence factorize. So I know my first bracket is going to be x plus 3. Then you've got to set up a wider bracket with an x squared term in, an x term in, and I would call it a planet Earth term, but a term without any x's at all in. I'll give you a chance to work on that before I show you my complete answer for dotty 2. Okay, so here's my answer. X plus 3 is the first bracket. To make the second bracket, x times x squared, give me the x cubed, and 3 times negative 20 will give me negative 60. So I know the small underneath the x squared term. As I said at the start, I generally do the x squared terms. That gives me 3x squared, but I want 4x squared because the question says 4x squared. So I now do plus x squared. 3x squared plus x squared is 4x squared. And they work. Gives back to 4x squared. Then the second bracket is back to your GCSE. It's just a B grade 1 because it starts with x squared or 1x squared. Two numbers to multiply to 20 are 5 and 4. Plus 5 minus 4 gives us plus 1. Now these questions haven't asked us to solve. Assignment 6, it did say solve them, and then we said x plus 3 equals 0, x plus 5 equals 0, x minus 4 equals 0, and work out the values from. But these ones are only saying factorize. Generally is the case at additional. At A level, they normally ask you to solve. Now, here's your next question. Hopefully you're getting the idea now. They're very similar each time. Go and see what you can make a 10A. If I put my answer up, and then 10B and 10.2 is the bit that's the trickiest bit. But the top 4 marks, very straightforward now. Okay. First of all, we're going to substitute in not -3. That's a classic mistake people make. We're going to substitute in 3. There'll be in 3. I've shown some working. It gives me answer equals 70. B.D1, show that x minus 1 is a factor. Give you 30 seconds. Substitute in a number. Hopefully you know what number you're trying to get now to show it's a factor. Okay, substitute in 1, and hopefully it'll give me the answer 0. I have to show my work in here because we know it's going to equal 0. So it does equal 0. So x minus 1 is a factor. I didn't have to put so x minus 1 is a factor, but the reason why I did that will help me with dotty 2. Hence factorize. Now hopefully you've seen 3 or 4 of these now. And again, you'll notice in additional maths, they only start with x cubed. A level, they might start with 3x cubed, 2x cubed, but in additional maths, generally, they only seem to start with x cubed. So my first bracket is going to be x minus 1. Then I need a wider bracket with an x squared term in and a number on the end. Okay, so x minus 1, my bigger bracket will have x squared, x times x squared gives me x cubed, and the number on the end, minus 1, to get to 8, to multiply to 8, will be plus 8 on the end. And then it's up to you to do your smiles. And again, as I said in last week's session, basically factorizing is only really to do with adding and subtracting and multiplying. So here's my answer. Let's just run through this. X times x squared is x cubed. Minus 1 times plus 8 is minus 8. So I know I got those right. Then I put my smiles in. Minus 1x squared, that gives me minus 1x squared, but I need 5x squared. How do I get from minus 1 to 5? I add 6. If I add 6, that means it's going to be add 6x there, because I need 6x squared. X times 6x is 6x squared. And this is the easiest factorizing question I've seen in additional maths in the end. Two numbers are multiplied to 8 are 2 and 4, and they add up to 6. Next question. Find the remainder when it's divided by x plus 2. Now you'll find this question is very similar to the last one. It's almost like it's been cut and paste from the year before. Same sort of marks. So off you go. Go and do part A and B.1. So 4 marks are very, very straightforward. Okay, so there's part A. substituting in -2, and I get the answer -43. And b dot u1, I'm going to substitute in 2, and it should give me the answer 0. I already know what I should get, so I have that correct moment when I know it says equals 0. And as equals 0 is for x minus 2 as a factor. So now b dot e2. X minus 2 will be your first bracket. Alongside it, you'll definitely have an x squared, because x times x squared is x cubed. And then think on the end, what are you going to multiply -2 by to get the -42? Again, see if you can work on that and work on your smiles at the same time. Again, same idea, very samey. This is almost a bit of repetition now. X times x squared gives me x cubed. -2 times plus 21. Positive 21 gives me -42. That smile gives me -2x squared. Remember, I don't fill this mile in yet. -2x squared, then I do equals 8x squared. How do I get from -2 to 8x squared? -2 plus 10. So x times something gives us 10x squared. It must be x times 10x. It fits in the pattern. I've got x squared, I've got an x term, and then a planet Earth term. Again, what multiplies to 21? Pretty straightforward here. 7 and 3. 7 and 3 add up to 10. So the level of the factorizing here at the end is generally easier than session 6, because they're nearly always going to be, or they are in additional maths, they're going to stay x squared here rather than 3x squared. Next slide, exact same format as the last 2-3 questions have been. So hopefully you can get your repetition going now. We're doing 10A and 10B yourself. Then the first one I'm going to substitute in 4. Gives me a remainder of 126. Again, I've written up the top why I did 4. Don't have to write that. It's just to confirm why I did 4. Yep, and the remainders can be some strange numbers, some big numbers or small numbers. Whatever they are, they are. B dot E1, you should now know you're looking for 0. So you substitute x equals 2. If you don't get 0, see where you could have made a mistake. Yep, it's giving me 0. I've shown my working. We know it's going to equal 0. If you just put equal 0, you'll lose the marks. You get a mark for saying about talking in subbing x equals 2, showing you subbing it in and getting it equal to 0. Again, it's down to you now for the trickier part of the question. Set up your first bracket of x minus 2, then your second bracket alongside a little bit wider. So you can have room for an x squared term, an x term, and a planet Earth term. Okay, x minus 2, x times x squared, brilliant, x cubed, minus 2 times positive 15 is minus 30. Just a routine again. First smile gives me minus 2x squared. First term multiplied, really, I should be saying. The minus 2 times x squared gives me minus 2x squared. We're not doing the 8x squared yet. We're trying to get from minus 2 to plus 6x squared. Where'd that come from? Minus 2 plus 8x squared. 8x times x gives us 8x squared. And again, the factorizing here from the double brackets, very straightforward from this. Quadratic expression, the double brackets, very straightforward. 3 and 5 multiplies to 15. 3 and 5 makes 8. So the last bit is easy. First bit's a bit where you've got to get started, making sure you have the right signs here from up above and making sure you have plus 15. That's where people sometimes go wrong. They might put minus 15. Next question. You've guessed it. The layout of this question is exactly the same as the others. So off you go yourself. And substituting in minus 4, not 4, minus 4 gives me minus 246. Another not bizarre answer, but quite a big answer. It might make sometimes people think, is that the right answer? That is the correct answer. Again, I'm showing you here, minus 4 has to go in brackets, because on the squared term, if you don't do that, it will give you the wrong answer. Show that x minus 2 is a factor. X equals 2. Gives us 0, so x minus 2 is a factor. Basically laid out my question exactly the same every time. Hence factorize. Okay, give you a couple of minutes to do that bit. X minus 2 is a factor. The bigger bracket alongside is going to start x squared. And then minus 2 to get to minus 60 is plus 30. I've seen plenty of people go wrong there by thinking that's a minus, so they have to put minus 30. No, minus 2, and then be a plus 30 on the end would multiply to minus 60. So let's just check. Minus 2x squared, but I need to get to 9x squared. So I have to add 11. Now I've made a slight error here. I've said add 11x. It should have said add 11x squared. I wouldn't have been penalized for it. But for perfect notation, I should have put a squared on the end there. But that makes 11x in the middle anyway. That's the bit they're interested in marking. 11x, 2 knows what, apply to 30, 6 and 5. Say the last bit of factorizing is pretty straightforward, so it's making sure you get your smiles right. Now, as I said before, 4 marks is roughly worth about 6 minutes of time on an additional maths paper. That's not going to take you 6 minutes, because at the end of the day, it's just a bit of multiplying, a bit of adding to make sure they get the right number. The next question. Now this one does start with a 2x cubed for the remainder, but not the factorizing bit. It's back to just ordinary x cubed. Okay, so substitute in minus 3. You get minus 68. The next one, you're going to substitute in minus 2. And it's got to give you 0. So I'm just rushing through those two because that's the same format all the time. I would often tell my class that teach additional maths to do dotty 1 first, because just in case if they substitute in 2, they don't get 0, and they might inspire them to think, oh yeah, they've got to substitute minus 2 in. Then it will help them in part A. I'm not saying that's great teaching, but some of my class need to do that to confirm that they've done it correctly. Hence factorize. The only bit that's a bit different here, not massively different, is x plus 2. We've got to get from 2 to minus 66, so it's going to be minus 33 on the end. I think the last 2 questions have all been pluses on the end. There's my answer. I'm on 2x squared. I've got to get to minus 6x squared, so it's minus 8x squared. So it'll be minus 8x in the middle bracket. And we've already explained about the minus 33. Yeah, not so easy this one, but the only numbers really going to 33. 1 and 33 and 3 and 11. Minus 11 plus 3 gives us minus 8x. Say none of these have said solve. If they did, you just write x equals minus 2, x equals 11, or x equals minus 3. Now again, it's the same format. So if you want to, I would advise you maybe stop the video now, because I'm just going to beam my answers up. Okay, I'll be beaming my answers now. 99, next one's 0, and again the trickiest bit, the factorizing. So I've got x minus plus 3. Again, I've got to think 3 watts make 105. Now that is a bit trickier, but again, you can use your calculator. So that will give you 35. Here's my perfect solution there. 3x squared. I need to get to 1x squared, so minus 2x squared. Again, if these don't factorize, if your second bracket doesn't factorize, I would go back and check your workings. My experience is they will always factorize again. And that was the end of lesson 7. That's the final one for my November presentations. There will be a live meeting if there's any questions you need to ask. Hope this helps you with your additional maths. It's a great examination. It's really not straightforward, but it's good preparation if you're interested in doing A-level. Give you an idea. Some of these terms are exactly the same at A-level, to give you a bit of a head start.